Do y'all want to introduce yourselves? Are you good?
All right, I'm Pat Bizarre-Pete. I'm the one that put this together along with the slides these beautiful ladies did, and that's why my name's first.
I am Ashley Connor. I'm half of the Connor sisters and a part of this lovely troop right here. And I contributed slides.
Y'all are probably like, listen, I didn't know the Appalachian could be so funny, but if you follow us around, you will find many things to laugh at. The cool thing is I'm going to start this off, and these ladies are going to jump right in, okay? If y'all have any questions, please feel free to let us know. So number one, we're going to talk about the history. Now, people are like, wow, the Appalachians, I mean, it's a group of mountains. I mean, what can you say, right? But we have a really, really neat place that we call home, right? So the cool thing is I want y'all to think of way back when. Like, we're going to go way deep. I want you to think about when it was Pangea. Everything was one big piece of land, right? And you'll find people that come to our mountains and they say, man, I feel like I'm home here. It's because when the Appalachians was actually formed, it broke off from Europe and Africa. So that's where our roots and our magic comes from, guys. All this is all added into these mountains, plus our haunts and our haints and things that'll take you in the middle of the night. No. Some other stuff that we want to talk about is Appalachian Range is actually the oldest in America, and it goes actually through 13 states. We got southern New York all the way down to Alabama and Georgia. Now, I want to give y'all a clue, because we are southern, if you can't tell. So the clue is, and this is a tip for all of y'all, you will find that a lot of people are popping up now and they're like, I'm Appalachian. No, you're Appalach. If they ain't got the latch, then they ain't from south. That's the way we look at it, okay? That's a clue so y'all know, nah, they don't come from, and I don't know why people, you know how social media is, a lot of people want to brag about where they're from. If they don't got the latch in it, it ain't from south, okay? Okay, so granny women, all of us standing here are descendants of granny women. Does anyone know what a granny woman is? Oh, I got one here. Do I got more? I got two. Going towards three. What that is literally a woman from the mountains who she lived there and she's really thrived in it. You got to remember these girls, and I will say girls because I'm going to use our grandma as an example. She got married at the age of 13. By the time she had her mess of kids, she was in her early 20s. She had to know how to take care of them. She had to know how to, if they were sick, what they were supposed to do, what medicines were supposed to be used, let alone if anybody had a baby in the area, what they were supposed to do, how they were supposed to help them. Because I'm going to tell you, the one thing that we were was pride. We were proud. And we also had poverty problems. Let's nicely say we were poor, okay? So these ladies were like, I got you. So what they would do is that's where the granny woman come from. She was a midwife, she was a doctor, she was a healer. We have one thing in the mountains and we don't trust nobody. That's it. We got some distrust, guys. And you can understand why, you know? And it's funny because we always talk about when our families go to the doctor, there's always that one crazy, well, I'm not going to say crazy in case anybody in my family sees it. I'm going to say that one informed family member that they're like, you know what? Grandma went to the doctor and she never came back correct. And then she just died. That's all of our story. The other day, I swear to goodness, me and Ashley were talking to our aunt and she said, you know what? Don't get your foot operated on. That man down the road, he went and did it and guess what? He lost his foot. Now he's footless. And I'm like,
They actually turned down a whole region. They're like up there in the New River Valley. She went to that one doctor.
Yeah, you can't even go up there. This is how our family thinks. So the mistrust was really strong, okay? So what happened is we trusted our grannies, though. You think about it. If you wanted comfort, if you wanted somebody to make you feel better, we're going to go to Granny. She's going to take care of it all. And that's where these women came from. That's what this comes from.
Appalachian adaptations. So as Misty was explaining our history and things like that, I'm a visual type person. So in the Appalachian, we were obviously kind of cut off from society, and honestly, we just got like fast-moving, high-speed internet. Like at the beginning of this year, we're still, you know, everything's slower in the country. We'll say that. So, us living in that type of manner, you get traditions, not necessarily traditions, but you get things ingrained from your parents and your grandparents. Our grandfather did not believe in changing his shirt until he wore out the one he had. I mean, you know, he didn't wear it exactly every day, but my sister always makes fun of me, and she's like, yeah, because our granddad, we would buy him constant shirts and like packs of shirts, and in his dresser, he would be filled with brand new shirts, but he wanted to get that last penny out of that one shirt he was wearing. So in the Appalachians, we actually get freaked out if we throw stuff away. That's something we do. We're like, one day we're going to use that. So that is where this comes in. You'll notice when you look and drive through the Appalachian, you'll see things are cluttered. And we'll have like 5 cars in the yard because we think one day we're going to fix that Chevy Nova from the 80s. And the grass has grown up and everything. And we were very close-knit, as in that, like, hey, you need sugar? Well, I'll give you sugar, this type and other. And we were very big on bartering and things like that. So I don't know if they just thought somebody was going to bring over a car part or something, but you know. So we always hold on to everything because we're scared. We don't know when we're going to get the next one. So that's what you have there. You'll notice, like I said, they will be all kinds of junked up because we're scared of throwing things away. Another big thing in the Appalachian is our adaptations to music. Dolly Parton is like our hero in the Appalachians, because you'll notice how small she came from. She'll talk about the little cabin she came from. She'll talk about how she just had to make music with her nails and she could keep a beat, but she had that hope and faith within her.
This is the part you come for, the meat and taters.
Well, it's part of it. And that's Mountain Magic. And magic was part of the parcel of their everyday life. They would look at the moon, they would look at the sun, and decide when to plant. And the Farmer's Almanac was the first witch's book I ever read. It taught you to when to plant your root vegetables, when to plant your flowers, when to plant, the crops that would come in at the top, such as corn, and it would predict the weather, which is very, very important if you are interested in surviving in the mountains. You had to work for it. There was no free ride. Everybody was in the garden. From the time you were a child, you were picking nasty old, you can tell this is a bad memory, but out of our corn, there's old corn worms that you have to pull out, and potato worms, and you just kind of got to ignore the fact that just a few minutes ago you were throwing worms in a bucket and just enjoy what was on the table, which, by the way, was some of the best food you ever ate. And one of the things about church on Sunday is that you eat the best food you ever ate. And I'll tell you why, because all those old women would get together and they would try to outdo each other, and they were some kind of good cooks. But they didn't go to the store for what was in that feast. They took it out of the ground. And that was part of the magic that they survived with, is knowing nature. We hear about this, as far as witches now. Oh, I'm so close to nature. Well, let me tell you, there was nobody closer to nature than these old granny women. They were out the door with their children because their men often, like their grandfather, he would go several days just to get to work. He was a miner. My granddaddy, he was a lumberjack. A couple of days on an old mule sometimes to get to the camp, where he'd stay for a week and then he'd come on home. And yes, we had a little bit of drinking in the mountains because, Scotch-Irish.
But one thing is, we do a lot of things naturally, because you got to think, the only thing we had to do was drink, like she said. I mean, I was a very young person when I tried my first drink, because you don't got nothing else to do around there. So, anyways, you're hanging out with your donkey, and you're, woo. So you get really connected to nature out there, because you can't get on the internet. But the bad part is now a lot of our culture is getting kind of extinguished, because instead of going to the old person that's probably going to complain to you about how you're always on your phone, you'll just look on your phone. So you don't have those traditions. But where we were based, we had to go off of what they said. And if you question it, that was, you were being disrespectful. You can't question it. So you would never ask why they were cleaning every time something bad happened. You were just like, why the hell are we always cleaning this house? Jesus Christ, I just want to sit out there and drink, you know. So, it's actually that a lot of pine saw has magical ingredients. And when you clean out your house, you're getting rid of all the negative energy and things like that. So there was reasons behind what they were doing. But in reality, we weren't going to ask them. We just told you like a few years ago. Well, they just told us that, hey, there was some healers and witches in your line. How they would camouflage that is they would say, well, you know, they were peculiar. They're out there, yeah, you know, your grandma had her fits. And you're like, oh, yeah, you're right. She was mean as shit, so you never asked her. It was like, you didn't know why she was doing weird stuff. It was just, she was out there doing it. So it's a lot of the culture got, you know, you just don't ask. You don't ask, hey, do we have a witch in our line? That wouldn't be the correct verbiage with us. Because even with our grandmother, we talk about how a male, like a guy that was taking care of the family, he wouldn't keep a job. So the whole community went out and tarred and like beat him, you know, because he wasn't taking care of his family. So to come out and say, you know what, I'm a witch, guys, that wouldn't have happened. Because then you would probably got beat up and you would have lost your drinking privileges. And
haunted homes and abandoned places are sort of like my origin story for how I came to love and be fascinated by the paranormal. So I will share those homes that are part of my story with you and maybe find some discussion points along the way for you to reflect on later. And thinking about kind of like what different types of hauntings mean to us. So recently I was reading a book that somebody gifted me for my birthday. And it was like, came out in like 2010, and it was part of the Weird series, which I know Troy was part of, and it was just like a collection of like, it was like an anthology of like haunted house stories. And I was noticing that with the date that it came out, it was right before like the paranormal craze like took over, sort of like became a mainstream sort of interest, which has been great for me and great for my career and great for all of us to be able to convene together. But I noticed that the stories were primarily about just like your classic haunted house type of entities. There were no evil entities, there was nothing that needed to be banished, there was nobody who had been possessed and taken over, there was no over-dramatization. It was a collection of stories about like things that go bump in the night. And it reminded me of the before times, if you will, like 15 years ago when haunted places were exciting. So growing up in Maryland, when I sort of connected to history through haunted places, and places would welcome you because they were excited about their ghosts. And we still, obviously, we see plenty of that now, but we see so much more of this sort of overconflated need to get rid of spirits, or move them, or displace them, or banish them, or see ourselves sort of maligned against things, and that, you know, everything is evil and everything is scary. And I do think that that is a sentiment that's kind of given a certain type of ghost hunter maybe a sense of self-importance, this need to find the truth and all that stuff that we hear, all those buzzwords, but isn't always necessarily rooted in the reality of haunted places, which are generally pretty benign and pretty freaking cool. And so that's kind of the attitude that I come to this with, and the idea of learning to live with and embrace things that we don't understand, have no control over, and can't possibly know how to help or banish or hinder. So I think there's some cultural shifts that are happening right now in that world, but I'm going to stop doing all of that and just talk to you about cool haunted places. This was my spirit photo that I took when I was 11. Do I still see a spirit photo? I don't know. I'll let you decide. Whenever, I know there's a joke that circulates, whenever you have to circle something and point to it with an arrow, it's probably not a ghost. But when I was a child, and I took this photo, and I have the photo at my table so you can see an actual real non-digital photograph, I saw a boy in this photo with like a bucket on his head. This was the house that I lived in on Magnolia Avenue in Frederick, Maryland. When I went to school, I stayed in the German house, which was like a language immersion house for nerds. And it was cool because it was like a house on the street, so we had some really great parties there, but that's not what this presentation's about. This presentation is about ghosts. So, the house was, so even given the fact that I was interested in ghosts, when I was in college, I was sort of taking a break and just living my life and not thinking that much about ghostly stuff. It wasn't until after college that I really returned to it, and all sorts of, I sniffed again, sorry. All sorts of interesting stuff happened in that house, and I was able to corroborate an interesting story with one of my roommates. So I studied in Germany when I was in my junior year, so the person who was still living in the house, she came and stayed in my room. Previously, when I had stayed in that room, I had had this horrific night terror where a woman, very classic sort of night terror, like a woman in a black dress with long black hair came out of the closet and she was screaming at me. She was like screaming and pointing at me, but there was no sound coming out of her mouth. I remember being super weirded out by this, but I didn't tell anybody and it wasn't a big deal, and I've had sleep paralysis and night terrors before. And just then years later, Sarah was telling me that when she stayed in my room, she was like, "This is the weirdest thing. I would have these weird nightmares that this lady would come out of the closet. She was all dressed in black and she had long black hair and she would scream at me, but I couldn't understand what she was saying and there was no words that came out of her mouth." And I remember like all the hair stood up on my arms when she told us this story. And years later, when I was doing some research on the house for my book Maryland Ghosts and some other things, she was telling me that this house had been occupied, it was built in the 1940s and had been occupied by a couple, and one of the pair was a nurse, and she had passed away from cancer. And right after I graduated, I was still living on campus, and about a month after I graduated, I was diagnosed with stage 4 Hodgkin lymphoma. And so Sarah and I had this theory that this woman who was coming out of the closet screaming at us was not your old hag, your typical old hag, but you know, maybe a remnant of this woman who was trying to warn me and Sarah, who's one of my best friends, that things were not right. So this particular house, this is where we start getting into some of the sort of weird ethical dilemmas that we have around like being ghost hunters and being interested in paranormal investigation. This is a house, I think, in Stafford, West Virginia. Let me not make things up. Yes. Yeah, Stafford, Virginia. And this is a house that was bought by a gentleman who purchased it solely to conjure ghosts to create a haunted house. Now, he looked exactly like the type of person who would do something like that too. And we filmed an episode of the show, The R.I.P. Files there, which it's episode, whatever, what is it? Episode 4 of season 2 called Ghost House. You can watch it for free on Tubi and whatever. You can watch it on Amazon Prime. It's a cool episode. The guy's weird as hell. He was very nice, but he definitely gave vibes, you know. And he basically wanted to make the house hospitable for spirits, which I wasn't sure how I felt about that, especially since the house was not hospitable. It was extremely creepy, and I'm like, just because you die doesn't mean you suddenly have poor taste in furnishings. So I didn't get any sort of good vibes from that place, and it not a whole lot happened while we were there. Like, this is a few of us just kind of sitting around looking bored, because we were. And he had flowers sprinkled all over the floor for like footprints and stuff, which I thought that was kind of cool, because that sort of harkens back to like the old days of like, let's see if we can capture the footprints. And he claimed that he did have like a footprint, so we all gathered around like really like this alleged footprint kind of thing, and I was like, that's really cool, neat, yeah, right, yeah, you know. But we had a Ouija board session there later that night. Everybody left except for me and one other person, because they were like, ghosts, yes, Ouija board, no. I love Ouija boards, so I was like, I'm all in. and he was our recorder, so two of us had our hands on the thing, and I was looking away from the planchette, and he was our recorder, he was like transcribing stuff. And we had a really interesting session that was so interesting, you could see that he was surprised that all of this stuff was happening, like his eyebrows raised like all the way up, like Millhouse. And he couldn't believe that we had this, this connection during our Ouija board session. And
that what you're about to hear is a story of love. It's just that our main character's idea of love happens to be a lot weirder than ours. Or at least I hope so. Anyway. Key West, Florida has always been home to some of America's greatest eccentrics. It's a place that, far removed from the American mainland, serves as a last outpost for writers, dreamers, musicians, and weirdos. But in 1940, news spread around the island that something strange was happening at the laboratory of Dr. Von Kassel, who was definitely one of the resident weirdos. But most people just rolled their eyes and shrugged it off. It was Key West, after all. But then when details leaked out about what was happening, it was discovered that there were things that were even too weird for Key West people. And it might be for some of you too. This story of what happened in Key West is one of the most shocking stories of love and passion in American history. It's a story of a beautiful woman, a very strange man, and a love that managed to defy death in many ways. It's also one of the most twisted stories I've ever written about. So you'll either thank me for this story of strange love and a restless spirit, or you'll never buy another one of my books again. So I guess we'll see. Maria Elena Milagro Hoyos was born on July 31st, 1909. The daughter of a Key West, Florida cigar maker named Francisco Pancho Hoyos and his wife Aurora. She had two sisters, Florinda the oldest and Celia the youngest. Elena was in the middle. They grew up in Key West, and there's nothing to say that Elena's childhood was anything other than normal. Her family had been wealthy in Cuba before falling on hard times and moving to Key West so her father could work in the cigar factories. At first, her family and friends thought Elena's paleness and lack of energy were caused by grieving over the loss of her baby, but when she was taken to see the family physician, he gave a tragic diagnosis. It was tuberculosis. The disease was incurable in those days and barely treatable. In Key West in the 1930s, it was the #1 cause of death, especially among cigar makers who passed the germs to one another in the close confines of the factories. And Elena's was even worse than that. Of the varying strains of the disease that existed, hers was the deadliest. Well, realizing the seriousness of the situation, her doctor sent her to the U.S. Marine Hospital for a blood test and an x-ray. And it was here that her story took a very strange turn. And that was because this was where she met a German-born radiology technician named Karl Tanzler, or as he liked to call himself, Karl von Kassel. Little is known about his real background because his invented one was so confusing and it changed so often. He grew up in Germany but claimed that he traveled to India and Australia where he did electrical work, bought boats, purchased an entire South Seas island, and began building a trans-ocean flying plane around the time of World War I. And then along came Count von Kassel, a medical man with all the answers. He used all his knowledge to attempt to treat and cure Elena with a variety of medicines, as well as x-ray and electrical equipment that he built himself, that he brought to their home. Their daughter's health had become his mission, and he was doing it all for free, so they couldn't really turn him away, at least not at first. Karl frequently yelled at them for not following his directions and blamed them when Elena got sicker. They threw him out of their home, but eventually realized he seemed to be their daughter's only hope. And as Elena became sicker, he returned to their home with a new treatment he'd devised. This new treatment was a series of electrical shocks Using a small inductor box that was connected to a high-powered, high-frequency medical unit, that's the only way to describe it, because he invented it himself. It had wires, gauges, coils, and a glass globe on top that lit up when the device was charged and ready to deliver its jolts. It must have looked like something out of a Flash Gordon Saturday serial movie of the day, and it probably worked just about as well. Carl still clung to the delusion he could save her, refusing to admit that it wouldn't work. But despite all his efforts, Elena died on October 25th, 1931. So one night in April 8, 1933, Carl crept into the cemetery, removed Elena's body from the mausoleum, and carted it out of the cemetery in a little toy red wagon. He took her home with him, and that's when things got even stranger. Carl wired Elena's bones together with wire and coat hangers and inserted glass eyes into her head. He had to straighten out her arm, which had been folded across her body in the coffin, and he did this with counterweights, using a cord and a pulley on the ceiling, fastened it to a bandage on her wrist, and with a little tension, he popped that baby right back into place. The cosmetic work went on for some time. As her skin began to decompose, he replaced it with silk cloth that had been soaked in wax and plaster. And when her hair fell out, well, he just fashioned a wig from hair that had been given to him by Elena's mother after the funeral in 1931. He filled the cadaver with rags so that he could keep her original form, and he dressed her in clothing, stockings, jewelry, and gloves that he bought for her. Carl also used copious amounts of perfume and disinfectants to mask any odor and further slow the deterioration of the body. Now, anyone else would say that Elena had been turned into a modern-day mummy, but Carl, she was returning back to life. Now, by 1940, people in Key West, a place where pretty much anything goes, were starting to ask questions about Carl. They all knew he was a little odd. I mean, he built a private laboratory with no running water away from town, but the weird thing was he spent all his money buying jewelry and perfume, although no one had ever seen him with a woman. But remember Carl's obsession with that dead Cuban girl, and they started wondering what he was doing out there in his ramshackle lab, and, well, rumors began to spread by way of what the island called the Coconut Telegram. Her sister's preserved corpse had been in Carl's possession for 7 years now. He'd been sleeping in bed next to her, and as an autopsy would later reveal, he'd been doing other things too. And I'll leave that up to you, to your imagination. Well, on October 5th, nearly a dozen vehicles pulled up in front of Carl's home laboratory. 2 sheriff's cars, a justice of the peace, a hearse, and several others. When Carl opened the door, the sheriff handed him an arrest warrant. He was being charged with the possession of a dead body. As he was led away, Carl looked back over his shoulder at Elena. It was the last time he'd ever see her. He caught a glimpse of her face as the men from the funeral home loaded her into a wicker body basket. He was still watching from the back window of the police car as they placed her in the hearse. And then she was gone.
Why exactly am I interested in the paranormal, and why am I having these experiences, especially when I was a child? How many people here have had experiences when they were children? As expected. So I've been really diving into the psychology of it, and I found this study by Davis Marks, who said that essentially he wrote this paper, and the abstract, I'll just summarize the abstract of it, but he says victims of trauma and abuse are predisposed to subjective paranormal experiences. Anyone else kind of feel called out here? Yes. A little bit. And then there's another study by Ross and Joshi that also, essentially that abstract explains that those of us who have experienced trauma in childhood are more prone to have interest in paranormal beliefs and or dive into the occult. So, let's talk about the current paranormal investigating culture. Give us a sign of your presence. Not once if for yes. Not twice for no. Do you know that you're dead? Yes. No, I'm not a fan of that. I don't know, is anyone else a fan of that? I mean, if you are, that's awesome. I'm personally not. I've noticed that there's been this uptick in the past 8-ish years that traumatic events have been used as a not necessarily a conversation topic, but as a provocation tactic. Where we're bringing up trauma for the sake of getting a response out of the spirit. Where the priority is getting those lights to blink. The priority is to get that anguished EVP of somebody screaming. And I'll be honest, that's why I veered away from mainstream paranormal entertainment, not necessarily just television, but also content creators, social media, because personally for me, I get triggered when I watch some of this content. New investigation methods are being formed, but it's based on what people are seeing on TV, which makes sense. Even though we have 400 people here at this conference, we're still a very small percentage of the paranormal community. So people who are getting into this, all they may know is what they see on television. So they are emulating what they see on TV. So the performance that we see on TV, this is my theater degree talking, is shaping those paranormal experiences, and it's creating this ripple effect. And we have different contexts of performance, so to speak. So we're encountering a new era, not a new era, but a new chapter right now when it comes to people who are getting into it from what they saw on TV. And I'm one of them. I got into, I emulated what I saw on TV for years. But it's looking at it through this lens of different types of presentations and performances. 1992, my grandfather passed away. And he was my father figure. In 2000, my grandmother died. 2004, I was assaulted. 2005, 2006, it was New Year's Eve, that's why the date thing, it was literally New Year's Eve 2005. I got into a really bad car accident that involved me getting hit by a car, knocked over a guardrail, and I fell 25 feet to the road below. I have a titanium, no. 2009, I finally moved out of the house. My mother was not thrilled about that, which was also a traumatic experience. And then 2015, my mom died. So you can see a correlation here of I had an experience after a traumatic event in my life. So you can see where there's an interweaving here of my paranormal experiences and traumatic experiences that shaped who I am today and why I use dark humor to cope with things. So, to go over the car accident, my car hydroplaned, I went over the guardrail. I lived in San Diego, California. It was raining. Anyone here from Southern California? When it rains, people freak out, right? People cannot drive. I hydroplaned. I got out of the car. Another car came and hit me, and that's how I got knocked over the guardrail. Yeah, it was fun. But after that, I had my out-of-body experience in the trauma room. I saw myself floating over my body. A lot of things happened there, and there's a little backstage shot from Haunted Hospitals. So I dealt with an attachment, a man that had also passed. He was also in the same trauma room as I was, and we both had an out-of-body experience at the same time. He did not make it that night, and he attached himself to me, and one of the things he said over and over again was, "Why you, not me? Why you, not me? Why did you live and I had to die?" So he stuck around for about 8 months. He came home with me. It wasn't until I empathized with him that we were able to get rid of him. But before that, I had religious intervention. It did not work. It more so put a muzzle on him. But it was a traumatic experience, and this happened in 2006, the bulk of 2006. I had the chance to finally tell my story, thanks to Richard Estep, actually. If people know Richard Estep, he actually covered my story on Haunted Hospitals, and he wrote the foreword for my book. So realizing that we are processing our trauma, in a sense, with paranormal investigating, or at least I am, using I statements, I feel like paranormal investigating, ghost hunting gives us that safe space to really handle those uncomfortable topics. you know, we're in a haunted location and we can't see these spirits, usually. I know some people can. I'm not one of them, but I know some, you know, usually we don't see them. We don't see their faces. I don't see them like talking to you right now. But I've also realized, especially in the paranormal media space, that this can also give somebody some bravery, almost like the equivalent of a keyboard warrior. You know, where you can say things and you don't see the reactions of the other person. And it could cause unintentional upset or triggering emotions between both the living and the dead. The spirits that we're engaging with, they're more than just the data. I know data evidence is a big motivator for paranormal investigators. It's finding proof of the afterlife, proving that we survive, our consciousness survives when our bodies are gone. But for me, I feel like spirits, us the living, we deserve more than poor audio and video files on YouTube to music from Evanescence. I feel like we deserve a little more than that. So you hear it right when the flashlight goes up. I don't know what that voice is saying, but the fact that we got that reaction. And so we had two things happen at the same time. The flashlight went off and you heard the voice. So, and it's an enthusiastic, like, you know, some of my team members think that maybe she's saying, oh, that's good. Or it's like a, you know, just a sigh, but I don't feel any negativity with that, but I thought that was interesting. All right, this next one. Don't sweat the small talk. So this was in Hillview Manor in Newcastle, Pennsylvania. This was, I was alone in this room that was once a lunchroom, and then it turned into a salon. And this is very much small talk. I have feedback for myself as well of how I could have done that encounter better, but I was also by myself, and I didn't expect the REM pod on the counter to go off the way that it did. So I'll play that one. Hello. How are you this evening? Okay. Hi. Would you like me to cut your hair? I can't say that I know how to cut hair. Okay. I'm just going to back slowly away from this, just in case it's me. Okay. My name is Alex. What's your name? Okay. Interesting. I came a long ways away to investigate, to talk to you and hear your story. Just doing a test. Okay. All right, well thank you for letting me know that you're here. Yeah, so again, small talk, but there was an interaction there, and even when I went up to the REM pod and I moved back, it didn't go off again, so, and then of course I'm like, you want me to cut your hair? I don't know how, but, so, I think maybe that was more amusing for them than it was for me, but,
Alrighty, so as you can see, we're doing this outro from our house. It's actually the next day, because yesterday I had some technical difficulties. I was filming the second to last speaker, and during her presentation I had 2 brand new fully charged batteries actually drain on me within a minute. Now I can't explain that right now. I will get to the bottom of it, but you're the paranormal believer.
I am. I'm the believer. Jay's the skeptic.
Yeah, so I know you call me the skeptic, but for me, if I have a couple of nicknames. If I'm in a great mood, I'm Debunky Brewster. If I'm in a grumpy mood, which of course yesterday towards the end of the day, I was pretty grumpy. I'm Archie Debunker. But overall, the conference itself was amazing. All of the speakers were phenomenal. What I liked about it was they all had different subjects. They were very entertaining, and I learned a little bit too. So what did you get out of the conference?
Once again, I love this conference. I've been 3 times. I'll continue to go because every year is different. I haven't had the same speaker twice, so you're always learning more things. This year, Sherry Brake really stood out to me. She was on past lives and karma, in your present life, and talking about deja vu. That one was really interesting to me. The granny women, so the Appalachian Mountain Magick, was interesting too. The 3 of them were a hoot to listen to and to talk.
They were very funny.
Yeah. And then I always enjoy listening to Troy talk and tell his stories. Troy Taylor is an awesome author. I have a ton of his books, and listening to him talk, I can get lost and I could just sit and listen to his stories all day long.
He is a great storyteller for sure. And actually that's what keeps me interested in all of this, because I enjoy the stories, the history, the lore, the tales. And then when it comes to all of the paranormal stuff, the unusual stuff, I have to get to the bottom of it. So I have to try to figure it out. But the stories and the lore and the tales, that's what grabbed me for this convention or this conference, right?
Oh, yeah.
So, if you enjoy this video, give us a thumbs up, comment down below. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe. It'll let you know when our new videos come out. It'll keep you in the loop.
Oh, yeah.
We just want to thank you for coming along with us and enjoying some paranormal conference.
Yep.
And we want to thank you for Jay and Valing around with us.
Okay, so one last thing before you guys all go. I have to show you my haul from the Haunted America Conference 2023. Found some great Halloween ornaments. Super excited about that to add to our Halloween tree. Found a graphic novel on the Crescent Hotel in Eureka Springs, Arkansas. Super excited for that. And of course, every time I see Troy and he's got books on sale, I have to buy some of his books. These are 3 that I didn't have. And then Amy Woomer wrote one of the books with Troy, so of course I wanted to get some of hers. She had a very Victorian Christmas. Very excited to read that. She also had the ABCs of Cryptics. Jay thinks I'm crazy because it's a kid's book, but I just think it's so cool. Got a couple of books from Luke. He is one of the speakers that does the Haunted America walks on Saturday nights there in Alton. This is my drawing that I had done from one of the vendors. And it turns out looking like my dad quite a bit. Kind of scary, and he's been gone 19 years. Of course, I had to get a Haunted America conference shirt. Get one every year I go. We got some more scary coasters to go with our horror coasters that we have already. And then this book I'm really excited about. It's Ghost of Jefferson Barracks. If you grew up in St. Louis, you knew where Jefferson Barracks was. They had some ball fields down there that I used to play on. And you could see all these old buildings, so I'm excited to read about that. So those are all my goodies this year from the Haunted America Conference.